Hi everyone, today's video is a shorter version of a video that will be coming out later on this channel about non-self. So this is a short, slightly more compact version of that, and the concept of non-self really is has been something that's been a personal focus of mine subsequent to some quite traumatic changes in my life last year. So non-self is something that is part of the sort of three aspects of the Buddhist teachings, which is non-self, change or impermanence, anicca, and then dukkha, which is interpreted or translated as suffering. So the concept of non-self is a really good way of starting to perceive those three realizations or aspects of awakening that Buddhism talks about. There's been a lot of focus in a lot of Buddhist cultures on perceiving impermanence, but some people have recently noted that that's actually quite a challenging way of really going about it. Non-self, according to some recent commentators, is actually a potentially an easier way to start to realize these things, and certainly that's been my experience. So what is non-self? There's been a lot of back and forth and to and fro and arguments that focus on the dogma that is associated with the concepts or philosophical concepts of non-self and self. And those obviously are quite ancient, go back a long time. Really, the concept of self dates back to the pre-Buddhist era, and the Book of Sixes talks about the concept of there being a self or a constant that it always goes through from lifetime to lifetime and beyond. And the Buddha actually rallied against that idea of there being a self. He insisted that there is no self, there is no identifiable constant. It is, in fact, always changing and is related to our constant flow of karma that we find ourselves immersed in through this sea of samsara that we are in. And ultimately, it goes back to the five aggregates. So a lot of Buddhist texts talk about non-self and relate it back to the five aggregates. The five aggregates being form, feeling, whether it be positive, negative, or neutral, or positive, neutral, negative. And then you've got cognition, and then you've got thought formation, and as a whole, that's consciousness. So karmic inheritance, or the karmic continuum, or our ability to generate karma, happens at the fourth aggregate, which is cognition. So we see a form, or we hear a form, or feel something, and then we perceive that as a feeling of either a positive experience, a positive, neutral, or negative, and then we cognize it, and we recognize what it is, and then we have thought formations that occur subsequently. They can be perpetuated by whether the experience is positive or negative, or neutral, but those thought formations, we can get carried away in them, and that's where ultimately our defilements start to come into play, and our defilements can take us on a theme park ride about those thoughts that we're thinking of subsequent to that experience of a positive or a negative or a neutral experience. So the dependent origination, or in that fourth skandha, is where karma starts to generate. We call that sankhara. And I encourage you to go away and research these terms if you don't know them already. that at that point of dependent origination, or where we start to generate karma, is where we start to perpetuate our existence in this karmic continuum and samsara. And very much the focus of Buddhism and meditation is to try and bring our mind to a relative stillness at that point of sankhara. When you bring your mind to that point of relative stillness, the ability for that karma to generate and perpetuate is limited. And really that's where awakening starts, and that's where it ends. So non-self as a concept, like I said, is about the fact that the Buddha taught that there is no identifiable constant. It's always changing, and we can experience that in our day-to-day lives because we're immersed in this sea of karmic inheritance. There is a concept of volition according to the Buddha's teachings. It's not all out of our control. We can have a degree of volition and have some control. And a really good simile to this in our modern day existence is like being strapped into a self-driving car where we don't have access to the controls. We're locked into that passenger seat, and then we can have access to the sat-nav and choose the destination. That's our aspect of volition that I see. We can choose our destination, and then as to how you get there is dependent on the self-driving car. Anything can happen: a flat tire, run out of fuel, run out of battery. You could have an accident. There could be roadworks that end you up in a total mess and the wrong direction, or someone else could crash into you. Anything can happen, and really that's where it comes down to is, you know, we can choose where we want to go, and there's that aspect of volition. As to how you get there depends on your karmic inheritance and your karmic integrity, and whether you have it to reach that goal in life, if you like. It could from something very simple like, you know, your holiday plans. Where are you going to go? These school holidays or whatever, your next holidays that you've planned, the destination you've chosen, how you're going to get there, by car, by train, by aircraft, what could happen in those journeys. And so ultimately the karmic inheritance is what's going to determine that. And really, it's a very simple way of thinking about it. So the self-driving car, choosing the destination on the sat-nav, and whether the car will take you there is really the fact that non-self means that we really have no control over how that karmic inheritance manifests itself in the here and now, and whether it is conducive to your destination or your goals, your life goals, etc., etc., or really the very simplest of thing like planning a holiday is, are you going to get to that holiday? Is it going to be fun? What's it going to be like? So on and so forth. Really, it's the concept of non-self can be applied to the very simplest of day-to-day aspects of our lives, to the grand scale of our life goals. But really, the whole point is we have no control over how our karma manifests in this lifetime, because we just don't. We can't really be in control of that. We can control, as I said, where we want to go, what we want to do, etc., etc. But really, there isn't. There's another aspect I want to talk about, which is the fact that, you know, there's no identifiable self. It's always changing. And really the fact that non-self is about the fact that we can't attach an identity, a concept of self involves having that identity, who we are, our ego, etc., etc. But these are all mind-made concepts. They're actually illusory. They're they don't really exist except in our minds. So they're not real, they're an illusion. So that's another thing to contemplate on. But really what I wanted to get across is the fact that in my investigations and contemplations I've realized that really I've had no control over how my karma manifests in this lifetime, and therefore how it's brought me towards my goals, closer to my goals, or further away from my goals. I've felt this lack of control, and that further leads to then the realization of impermanence, that everything around us, everything, every person, every interaction we have, every sense object, everything around us is impermanent, and it's out of our control. And that deeper realization of impermanence will lead to dukkha, and dukkha is translated as suffering, which probably a more easier to understand translation is dispassion, disillusionment, disenchantment. These might sound like really bad things, but actually they're a good thing. You see the world with sobriety. You don't become enchanted and intoxicated with the sense objects that we find ourselves surrounded by, visual, whether it be visual, auditory, or thought, or conceptual. So we find ourselves less intoxicated by everything that's around us. We see it with sobriety, and we don't get swept away by those stimuli that we find ourselves surrounded in this existence. So really understanding non-self and perceiving it and really understanding it and contemplating it allows us to then relate it back to this triad of impermanence, suffering, and that's for non-self. So understanding non-self first and then relating it back to impermanence and therefore dukkha is a really powerful way to do it, I've found in my own experience. And really non-self, as I said, understanding it as the fact that we have no control. And therefore that lack of control leads to our understanding, or we start to really taste impermanence and then therefore suffering. Okay, I hope that analogy of the self-driving car helps you. It certainly helped me, and everyone I've related the story to has found it useful. So I hope you do too. Any questions, leave them down in the comments. There's lots of other speakers on non-self and their videos, and I'll leave the links down to those videos below from eminent speakers such as Bikkhu Bodhi, other bhikkhus like Ajahn Brahmali, etc., etc. So I hope you find those links useful, and if you have any other links or any other talks that you found useful on the topic of non-self from the Buddhist perspective, please leave them down in the comments. All the best. Take care. Bye now.